Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SCA's 53rd monthly Zoom presentation. We're now well into our second half century, so to speak, of monthly SCA Zoom presentations with no end in sight. My name is Brian Gallagher. I'm the president of the Society for Commercial Archaeology. I will be your host tonight. Welcome to all our guests and to any new people we have with us tonight. We're happy that you took the time out of your autumn evening to watch an SCA presentation. I hope you enjoy the show. And for anybody watching the recording of this episode of the SCA's monthly presentations who is not a member of the SCA, we earnestly ask you to consider joining. Funding for the various activities of the SCA comes almost exclusively from our membership. Just visit our website at www.sca-roadside.org and follow the links. Now I have the pleasure of introducing tonight's presentation. Kathy Kikkert will bring us back to a wondrous time when a vibrant sea of neon signs illuminated the glamorous streets of Hollywood. Discover the lost signs of the Hollywood Hills. Revisit the beloved Grauman's Chinese theaters, neon dragons that hovered over Hollywood Blvd for decades, and delight in the exuberant typography of Googie coffee shops and bowling alleys. Accompanied by rare photos and mesmerizing video and fun stories. Kathy Kikkert is a graphic designer / illustrator, specializing in book design and restaurant branding. Before moving to Hollywood, she was an art director at Doubleday and book designer at Simon & Schuster in New York. Her retro modern flair is expressed in the books, brands, and designs that she has designed. She has a BA in art history from New York University and has been photographing vintage neon signs for over 20 years. Hollywood Signs is her first book. Kathy, will you please share your screen with us and let's see the presentation. You're muted, Kathy, maybe, or okay, can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Brian. It's great to see you. It's great to be here. I'm very excited. It was great to meet a lot of new friends on the trip to Nashville. And I just, wanted to just underline what you said about the joining the SCA. I love the trip and all the literature and being with people that, care about our vanishing roadside. So I'm going to start. Let me see if I can share my screen. Okay. Okay, so this is my book, Hollywood Signs, The Golden Age of Glittering Graphics and Glowing Neon. It was published by Angel City Press last year, forward by the amazing Chris Nichols. And I picked out a few theaters and bowling alleys, things that I thought would be of special interest. The thing that I love to do in these talks is to show some animations of neon, because like we can look at pictures, but we forget how amazing it was to like walk down the street or drive down the street and see like, things illuminated and moving and animated. So here we go. So of course, the Hollywood sign. This is the 1978 view. The 2023 was the 100th anniversary of the Hollywood sign. It was built in 23, which was a boom time for Hollywood. There were a lot of communities being built in all over Los Angeles, but in the Hollywood Hills, which we'll see in a minute. But the people were coming to Hollywood and Los Angeles in droves, and the Chamber of Commerce of Hollywood actually had a campaign saying, tell your friend. This was on like mail that came out of LA, it was in newspapers. They took out ads in newspapers across the country. Tell your friends, don't try to break into the movies. in Hollywood, unless you have full, frank, and dependable information, it may save disappointment. So this is like the broken dreams of Hollywood was like right there from the start. So as well as the glow and success and illumination and fantasy of Hollywood. So the Hollywood sign was built as a real estate advertisement up in the hills. It originally said Hollywoodland. I'm assuming most people are probably a little bit familiar with the story. It was meant to be temporary. It was repaired through the decades. Eventually, land came off in, I think, 1949, and there started to be like local pride about the sign. So it was repaired through the years, and in the 70s, it was actually in tatters. And the famous campaign that Hugh Hefner started with the Chamber of Commerce to build a new sign, different famous people and some not so famous people sponsored letters, like Alice Cooper sponsored a letter in memory of Groucho, or in honor of Groucho Marx. So there was a lot of Hollywood history just in that redoing of the sign. So this is 1978. There was actually a TV special on, I think it was on NBC, celebrating the new sign. So this is from that night. But it was not the only real estate sign in the hills, and it was actually not even the first. So we're going to look at the lost signs of the Hollywood Hills. The first sign was actually a little bit to the west, Whitley Heights. This neighborhood is still there. It's a very beautiful neighborhood. A lot of early stars, silent movie stars lived in this neighborhood. The neighborhood was developed in 1918 by H.J. Whitney, who was one of the fathers of Hollywood. So this sign went up in 1920. It was enormous. Here's a close-up, but I love this view. You really get the scale of it. It was illuminated because electricity was brought up to roads, and electricity was brought up to the hills. And the LA Evening Express called it a monster electric sign that was illuminated every night and could be plainly seen as far as Wilshire Boulevard. And that is a distance away if you're familiar at all with Los Angeles. So these were giant they were monster signs. Another was the Outpost sign. This was 30 feet tall. And the Outpost neighborhood was advertised as the Hillside Homes of Happiness in the 1920s. It was illuminated with green neon, and you can see, I hope it's not cropped out, but you can see that guy standing in the letter. You can get an idea of how large these signs were. This sign was dimmed during World War II, during the mandatory blackouts. And the cool part of this sign story happened in 2002. There were some hikers that had noticed this pile of steel like crumbled up by the trail, and they had heard about the sign. They finally put two and two together and realized this was the Outpost sign, because you can actually hike up there and see the letters that have been sort of mangled. And but it's kind of amazing that they exist in any way, shape, or form. So I kind of love that story. As far as I know, our next sign is not there. The Vine Crest, which was closer to the Hollywood sign, this went up in the mid-20s, and the advertising said, "Watch for the big V" as you were driving up the hill. And you can see how enormous, again, a monster, that this sign was. And I know this house is still there. But I kind of wish the V were still there. Another in the neighborhood was Bryn Mawr. I actually used to live on Bryn Mawr Drive, in this neighborhood, which is now the Hollywood Dell, but it was originally called Bryn Mawr, which in Welsh means high hill. It was a difficult time for me to live there because it was a wonderful time. I loved living there, but between my last name and living on Bryn Mawr Drive, I had to spell things all the time for people. But anyway, they advertised panoramic views. And again, this sign I don't think was as large as the others, but still pretty cool. And we have one more, the Tryon Ridge, which was further east. And this was advertised as the Acropolis of Hollywood. So I don't have a picture with all of the signs, but this gives you an idea of, you see the Hollywood sign, Hollywood Land sign all the way on the right. And you can see the V there. The dais is, if you're familiar with LA, is now the Broadway Hollywood. That was a very well-known department store at the corner of Hollywood and Vine. And then there are a couple of other signs further over. We see the Bryn Mawr sign a little way on the left. So you get an idea of how, you know, as somebody that loves lettering, I love that there was all this lettering in the sky and in the hills. Okay. So we're going to move on to Grauman's Chinese Theater, which is about to turn 100 in 1927. It was built, and it was Sid Grauman's last movie palace. He the draw here was Grauman. So the signage in the beginning was very minimal, and people just would show up for whatever it was. You know, we didn't have like you know, a million options that they didn't have a million options that we do now. So we'll see this on another of his theaters in a minute, but the signage was very, very conservative in the beginning. There was some advertising off to the side on the sidewalk for Grauman's prologues, which were kind of live shows that's preceded the films. So what happened was they realized they needed to get a little more aggressive and the movie studios wanted to show what was playing. So here's an animation of the CinemaScope trestle that was added later on. We could see there were interchangeable, I'm going to play it again, neon letters for the title, but CinemaScope was the big draw, of course. And we have another view of it here. This is a later view where the title of the film and the stars or superstars got top billing, and then CinemaScope was a little bit old news by then, so it's smaller, but still an incredible and beautiful neon treatment. So 1957 is the year of the dragon at Grauman's. The dragons were installed as kind of a redo of the theater's facade. And the CinemaScope was sort of put aside, and CineMiracle was the new technology. It was only really used in one film, Windjammer, which appeared at Grauman's. And so this is part of this update. In 1957, the dragons were each 40 feet long. And I mean, just think about 40 feet long. That's like 4 stories high or 4 stories wide. They were enormous. And I still think of them as being on the theater because that's how I knew the theater. But they were removed in 2001. They were put in storage. There are a lot of different stories about what happened, but they were rescued by the Museum of Neon Art and really dedicated, amazing team. And the East Dragon is has been restored by Mona and is on display at Mona. We'll just take another look at some shots of the dragons. This is the dragon fully restored at the Museum of Neon Art, and definitely worth a stop if you're in Los Angeles to go see it in person because it's amazing. So before Grauman built the Chinese theater in 1927, the Egyptian theater down the street on Hollywood Boulevard opened in 1922. And a lot of people think that maybe this was inspired by the, the Egyptomania that was happening in the 20s. But this actually opened about a few months before King Tut's tomb was discovered. So this is 1922. So the theater is, I believe this month is 102 years old. I believe it's coming up in a week or two, the birth date. And this also began with similar conservative signs. That sign has been is still in the theater, and it's very small from the street. This is set back. There's a forecourt like there is at the Chinese theater. So again, similar thing happened. They realized people didn't know what movie was playing, so they added a blade sign or a vertical sign on the outside, right on the street. I don't know if this is visible. I hope you can see this. I had to sort of cut it up to show a detail. Oops. I'm sorry. I just lost my screen. I'm sorry. Okay, here we are. So you can see Grauman's was the main attraction, and Egyptian, look how tiny that type is at the bottom of the sign. It's really, I mean, it's kind of funny. It's there, but not there, as we say. So later on, now we're in 1932, you can see the bottom of another vertical sign, the N all the way on the left of your screen. That sign, that blade sign was recreated, and now we have that on the Egyptian Theater in Los Angeles. I'll show that to you in a minute. But they added this neon trestle, just, sort of a less dramatic version than the one that was on the Chinese theater, but still very just stunning. And they would there are banners and neon and very well lit, and this is like you're going to have a good time here. This is a lot of fun, right? So a big contrast from the early days. But then it got even crazier, because in 1949 we got this. So this is replaced that neon trestle, an enormous cement marquee covered with neon, animated neon. And this is 1949, so it predates the Dragons up the street by 8 years. And I really love this publicity still on the right. This is the opening for Oklahoma and got a ton of publicity. They did a special, you can see a special treatment of the marquee with neon. And I love these ladies, atop this like rickety ladder in high heels, like checking the neon. Make sure it's okay. So that's the Egyptian, and we're lucky that Netflix has purchased this theater and has done a complete top to bottom redo, and it's beautiful. And they have an interesting. This is what it looks like now. So we have that blade sign or vertical sign that was redone in the late 90s to match the 1932 vertical sign. So this is actually animated, and it's great to see more animation back on Hollywood Boulevard. So the Earl Carroll Theater is the third theater that I wanted to talk about. It's a stunning theater. This building is still here. There might be people here on the meeting that on the Zoom that know more about the current state. From what the last I heard is this building is for sale, and they're hoping to find a buyer and put a theater in here again. But let me just go back to the beginning. So we have Earl Carroll was an impresario. He had a theater in New York, and he came to LA and built this theater nightclub. And we can see that woman on the front is Beryl Wallace, who was one of the dancers, the love of his life, his companion. So he sort of immortalized her in neon on the facade of the theater. Around her portrait says, "Through these portals pass the most beautiful girls in the world." So this is an example of early modernism. It's a simple block, the theater, and it was brought to the next level by the really interesting and spare use of neon, those vertical stripes up and down, and the portrait, and then the beautiful lettering, which we're going to look at in a minute in a little more detail. The you'll see those blocks on to the left of Beryl. Those are signed autographs in cement panels, similar to what happened at Grauman's Chinese Theater and the famous footprints in the forecourt. But these were theaters signatures done in cement and affixed to the theater, attached to the theater. So we're going to see those in a minute again too. This is an absolutely stunning image of this theater. And we have an animation that is really one of my favorite things ever. This goes from day into dusk into nighttime, and you can see the letters spell out "Eat at the Theater" over and over again. This is Sunset Boulevard, and you could not miss this driving up Sunset Boulevard. Eat at the theater. So this is something I could watch all day. I'll stop it in a minute. I won't put it on a loop, but it's just incredible. And you can see the beautiful neon there too with Beryl Wallace. It's really spectacular. Okay. Inside the theater, I just wanted to bring, she's not officially a sign, but this is the Goddess of Light. And the entire exterior and interior of this theater was bathed in neon. So it went all the way around the stage. But this is one of my favorite things. I went on the tour of the theater several years ago and got to see her in person there on the right. But you can see the vintage view with that 50-foot long swirl of neon that she's conjuring up is incredible. So hopefully if somebody buys the theater, they'll bring this back. So we can cross our fingers for that. In 1953, Frank Senes took over the theater and made it the Moulin Rouge nightclub. This is one of my favorites. I love Louis and Keely, so this is one of my favorite images. You can see Beryl Wallace is still on the facade, and Frank Senes used very wisely, I think, used the same lettering for Moulin Rouge as Earl Carroll because it's so beautiful. It really great deco face, and it sort of maintained. But then they added a lot more. There were billboards on it, so it was even more attention getting. And I just found this clip of the facade, so we can see the signatures up close. And we're going to pan over to the marquee in a sec. Here we go. So we can see the marquee from the side there. And Sam Butera, who was in Louis Prima's band, and when the Witnesses were appearing, I got to see them, which they were amazing. Not at the Moulin Rouge though. Way before my time, but look at that beautiful like double line neon. And then we have that reader board. All this is still there. Oops. Okay. So the Age of Aquarius, 1968. The building had become like a TV studio and different things for a few years. Hullabaloo was there. But in 1968, this became the home for Hair, for the West Coast production of Hair. And they made the entire building. I mean, it's kind of interesting. That was that block. You can still see the outline of the theater. It was just a simple block and waiting to become a mural, and who knew? So the entire building became a beautiful sign advertising Hair. The mural was done, it was known as the largest mural at the time, and it was created by the Dutch art collective, The Fool. They had just worked with the Beatles in London in the psychedelic era. And so they created that psychedelic look for the Beatles. And then they came to LA and created this, which is just a masterpiece. And if you've been to LA in the last 5 years, you might have seen this on Sunset Boulevard because Quentin Tarantino actually had his production team recreate this mural for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the 2019 film. And because the theater hasn't sold, it is still here. So we get to see this every day, which is cool. So if you know from what I hear, people are saying everywhere, if you know anyone that wants to buy a theater, this is a good one. So bowling was very big in Hollywood, as it was all over the country back in the day and still. So we had several bowling alleys that I'm going to share with you. This one is spectacular. This building was originally, this is on Sunset Boulevard as well. This was originally the executive office building of Warner Brothers. So hence the columns, and it looks like an important building and maybe not the first thing you'd think of for a bowling center, but really it's kind of amazing. They outlined every column in neon. The pins and the balls and pins were animated. I believe it was open 24 hours, as a lot of bowling alleys were at that time. And I have this clip. It's not the greatest clip, but it's pretty cool. It's a like drive-by clip. So I'll just play it again real quick. It's amazing. You see the animation of the ball and pins. There's the ball. So super rare view and very cool. Okay, the next one is Carlin's Cinema Sports Center. And the joke here, or my joke here, is that you could do everything here but watch a movie. You could go bowling. We see the Grauman's time to bowl sign that we just saw in the Sunset Bowling as well. You could get your hair cut. You could play pool. You could go to the Rumpus Room. There's free parking. You could buy a gift. And one of my favorite things about this was that ladies could practice upstairs. They had like 6 little lanes upstairs that ladies could practice in without embarrassing themselves by their low scores. So like during the day. So that was nice and considerate of them. Here's a closer view. Now we're on Sunset and Vine looking north. So we see the Broadway Hollywood. We saw that earlier in the Dias department store. So that's Hollywood and Vine, and we're standing at Sunset and Vine looking north. We can see the Brown Derby and the tropics. So we're in the heart of Radio City West here, of course, NBC. And next door, we had the Palladium, and the Earl Carroll was right across the street. And CBS was right a couple buildings down too. So this is the heart of Radio City. The Hollywood Recreation Center, you can see that incredible sign on the left, was built in 1937. And that incredible sign. It was animated, and we'll see that in a second. Let's see if we have, there's the close-up. And here's the animation. I'll show it again. It's pretty cool that they. Okay, now we're in 1960, and some people might remember this location from The Big Lebowski. This is Hollywood Star Lanes, and this incredible star on the front, you can see that was on the facade there between Hollywood and Lanes. You can get a little sense of this if you go to Lucky Strike at Hollywood and Highland. They sort of recreated this signage along the alleys, which is kind of cool. And last but certainly not least is the Hollywood Legion lanes. This is one of my favorites because, I mean, I've never seen the word bowl up in the sky and giant swooping stars with a big neon swoop up to it, and it's just incredible. This is also 1960. The building originally, it began as the Hollywood Legion Stadium, which was a very famous boxing venue. Like, and all the stars would go there and watch the boxers. It was a big deal. But then in 1960 we have this, and it's just incredible. And we see the Hollywood there on the front. That's all neon, and here's the illumination of that. So cool. I'll just show it one more time. Okay, then we're gonna jump to drive-ins and coffee shops. So LA was filled with streamlined style drive-in restaurants on a lot of the major intersections. So this Carpenter's is at Sunset and Vine, southeast corner. So we're right across the street from NBC that we just saw. Really beautiful. The neon kind of outlines the very simple structure. So it's all shapes and letters sort of hovering in the sky. Here's McDonald's. This was on Sunset and La Brea. This is one of my favorites. This is Roberts, Sunset and Cahuenga. So these were all, you know, within blocks of each other. And here you can see again the Broadway Hollywood, the Plaza Hotel next to it, the Bank of America. I just love that you can see all these other signs around it, because Hollywood had a lot of rooftop signs, which we actually still have a lot of them. So this Art Deco lettering is just incredible for Roberts. I believe this was designed by Wayne McAllister. And in the back, you can see the Top Deck Bar, cocktail lounge. I would really be very happy if this were still here in Hollywood. This is one of my favorites. Here's Simon's, a very well-known chain. There were a number of these around town. This is the southeast corner of Sunset and Highland. And a lot of the Simons were turned into stands, and they kind of took everything up a little bit, and we're going into like Googie territory. So they have a Googie sign in the corner, which is spectacular. There's a recreation of the car hop at Universal City Walk that you can see, done by sponsored by the Museum of Neon Art. And I found this clip this might be this location, or it might be a location a little bit further east, but you can see where we should be able to see, yeah, the animation around that amoeba shape, the bulbs. It's so amazing. I'm gonna again. So tiny nailers might be the most well-known of because it did last until into the 80s. This was the corner of the northwest corner of La Brea and Sunset. So this replaced McDonald's that we saw earlier. And I mean, that big concrete swoop, we have tiny nailers and that beautiful script across it. I mean, this is just magical. This was directed at the corner, so you could see it from both, both going on La Brea and Sunset from both directions. And across the street was this another amazing sign for Carolina Pines Jr., designed by the great Arme and Davis. They also designed that motel right behind Carolina Pines Jr. And I'm going to mention that motel in a second again. But this is incredible coffee shop architecture that the shapes are organic. The sign becomes part of the building. It's integrated into the building. It's joyful. It's exuberant, a reflection of the post-war times, lighthearted, and meant to, as we all probably know on this, that meant to attract, this is for the car, directed at the car culture, meant to, stop you in your tracks as you're driving along. And Coffee Dan's was another famous coffee shop chain, a small chain in Los Angeles, I think, and beyond. I think there were definitely locations in the valley as well. And you can see this is sort of a branding note as a graphic designer. Like, you would never, in our era, would never have like two different sets of typography as you see on the left. The Coffee Dan's on the awning there, and then Coffee Dan's on the sign. Two completely different typefaces and treatments. And yeah, that would not fly now. So these locations were both on Hollywood Boulevard. The one on the left is actually Hollywood and Vine. Then we have Dupar's. Dupar's started, you might be familiar with them, at the farmers market here in Los Angeles. They opened in 1938. This location on Vine, just north of Hollywood, opened in 1941. And the signage was kind of conservative. And what happened was the Capitol Records building was built in 1956 right next to it. And probably not a coincidence that they came up with this amazing Googie style sign on the roof, and that starburst was rotating. So pretty incredible. And our last coffee shop is Toff's, and this is like this little mid-century gem. It was right next to Grauman's Chinese Theater, just steps away. And this is 1954, and I just love that it's a gem. It's a tiny little place right on the corner, and the sign was also a gem. Really a little unexpected. That little rectangle, tilted rectangle, and the um, those sort of jaunty serifs and the toffs. Real and little. We talk in the neon community about like apostrophes, a really nice apostrophe on this one. So the lettering is really cool and fun. So that is it for our coffee shops. I have one little story to tell. This is my little Hollywood sign story. So this is a Coral Isle Motel. This is Hollywood Boulevard, a few blocks west of Western. And there were many little mom and pop mid-century motels that cropped up. There were dozens of them actually on Hollywood Boulevard, Sunset Boulevard, and the streets around Hollywood, literally dozens. And they were all adorable. They all said in the heart of Hollywood, whether they were or not. And they were all, had beautiful mid-century signs. And the Coral Isle Motel, no exception. And I'm sorry if you hear noises, that's my dog Hank, and he makes a lot of noise. Anyway, so the Coral Isle became the downtowner later on. There was a family that one owned the one on or cousins owned the one on Hollywood, and then there was actually literally one near downtown. So they came up with the name the Downtowner. And I was driving by and I got a little concerned when I saw this crane and going on. I was like, are they taking that sign down? And I was really like, I felt it like a gut punch. And we have too many of those gut punches these days. So I talked to the manager and he said, no, actually, they're not taking the sign down. They're refurbishing it. So they said they were looking for a graphic designer. So they hired me to redo that oval in the center. And I happened to find this matchbook on eBay. Like, this is one of those moments where all the planets aligned, and I've never seen this matchbook. I'm on eBay all the time. I've never seen this matchbook before or since, but this was for the sister Downtowner Motel. So we took that type and put it on the Downtowner. So it's the Hollywood Downtowner Motel. And this is an early photo before they installed, they put in LED neon, but there are bulbs in the sign. It's incredible when it's illuminated. Here's a close-up from the roof and a night shot. This motel has been purchased by Covenant House, so there is, we're not sure what's going to happen with the sign and the building. So that's in the works, but it's still here for the moment. Here's a illumination, an animation, and it really is sort of Vegas style, and I love seeing this. I love driving by and seeing it. You can see it from blocks away, which is kind of the point. And I'm really glad it's here, and it was really an honor to work on, to make a contribution to one of the signs in Hollywood. So this is the end of my talk. I wanted to say that I'm happy to. So this is my Instagram at Kathy Kikkert. And if anyone is interested for the holidays, I'd be happy to, if you send me a message there. If you're interested in buying a signed book, I can sign it for you and send it to you. So you can contact me there. You can contact, I'd be happy to hear from you, or you can contact me at my website, which is kathykikkert.com.
Well, Kathy, that was absolutely amazing. That was so enjoyable, I have to say. I guess I can't believe where you got that footage and those pictures. They're just amazing. And one thing which I found really amazing is, and this is a sort of a collateral benefit, is that in almost every sign, almost every picture of a neon sign, there is also a street light. A Hollywood streetlight, and you can see how they have progressed too through the years. The 1940s, 1930s ones, very beautiful, almost Gothic lantern style, and of course they don't throw any light at all, but they look wonderful. And then when we get to that, then it's more the Cobra heads ones that are arched out over the street, and I'm sure they're quite effective and efficient, but they just don't have the character that the street lights had. So there's a little side benefit to your pictures as well, besides the beautiful, fantastic neon. And just as a little side note, now we have lots of questions, so I'm gonna get to them in a second. But we had a presentation about 2 years ago by, and I don't have the name at hand, but it's a gentleman that works on neon. He's a neon artist. I think more mainly repairs neon in LA, and he talked about that the Goddess of Light statue in the Grauman's Theater, and that long tube of neon, this kind of self-supporting, and he told us about that, saying, and I think, don't quote me on this because but we can find it in the archives of the presentations that are on the website. That was the longest self-supporting piece of neon tubing, ever, type thing.
Yeah,
So
was it Paul Greenstein?
yes, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, he actually, the first photograph I showed was from his collection, and he and Didia, his lovely wife, Didia
Yes.
DeWeiser, worked extensively on plans for the researching the neon and the signage for hopefully that will be recreated one day on the theater. So he
So yeah,
told
those were the two that gave an earlier presentation, and he showed that particular thing as well. So
they were both incredibly helpful and supportive on with this book. And he did say, and maybe he did in the talk, he figured that the swirl was actually two swirls of 25-foot long neon, and they meet in her hand.
oh,
One
okay.
in her hand, one, yeah, that was all figured that out. So that's how they did it.
All right. Well, first of all, we have all kinds of comments here for you, and you'll receive this chat later, so you can review them all. Most of them, or not most of them, all of them, are very, very complimentary. But we also have some questions. So Nancy asks, this is early on in the presentation when you were showing the big signs up in the hills. And she goes, why this practice of big signs for the neighborhood in LA? I haven't heard of this in other cities, but maybe it was done elsewhere too. Do you have any thoughts on that?
One of the things that was done elsewhere, I didn't point it out in this sign, but there was an H up in the sort of upper left of that photo. And that was done by Hollywood High students. And there are signs like that all over the country, mostly in the western part of the country where there are more big hills that
Right.
might be available. So a lot of colleges will put like their letter in a hill, on the side of a hill.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Now, are you still with us, Nancy? Did you want to?
I am. No, it's just that well, I'm from the East. Kathy, super job.
oh,
Um,
thanks.
yeah, I just have not seen that of this. I know that Hollywood, I mean, excuse me, LA is all about big lights and kind of like Las Vegas, but yeah, these signs that would announce coming neighborhoods, I guess. We don't have that on the East Coast. I'm just not familiar with it. So yeah, that was my question.
Yeah, it's my friend Sandy just pointed out that Burbank has a B, Pomona has a P, and those, for towns. But yes, it was unusual. And just the geography of Los Angeles and Hollywood itself made this possible because we sort of have a wall of hills and then flat. So it sort of, creates a almost a facade for these signs to go up on.
Right, that makes sense. That's actually a pretty good reason for doing that.
Yeah, it was smart, very clever.
Yeah. Philip Langdon asks now, and in the chat, some people have answered it, but I'd like to pose it to you too. Were there other nationalities of Grauman's theaters in addition to the Egyptian and the Chinese? And in other words, how many Grauman theaters were there?
I believe there were 5 or 6. There were several downtown that are still downtown, LA, and I believe there were some up north. But as far as I can think, the only themed, um, themed theaters were the Egyptian and the Chinese. Somebody else could correct me on that, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay, we actually did have maybe you know her, Allison Baker, weighed in on this and said that he actually had 4 theaters, and one called the $1 Million Theater, and also another one, the El Capitan,
Yeah.
and maybe there were more as well.
The El Capitan was not a Grauman's theater.
Well, that was not a.
Unless it was the one downtown. Okay. Yeah, I'd have to check that.
Oh, okay, there
My
you go.
focus is on the Hollywood theaters. So I'm not as familiar with the downtown theaters, but the $1 Million Theater was his and is still standing, and there's a beautiful sign on the rooftop.
Wonderful. Okay. Now, Nancy had another question too. And she says, where did all these, this is the question I asked you, when we were setting up the presentation, where did all these photos and clips come from? What archives or resource? They're amazing.
There are a couple of amazing um, uh, sources, a lot, because we have the internet, we can reach into archives really quickly. I used the Los Angeles Public Libraries, has an amazing collection. I used a number of photos, included a number of photos from their collection. And then I know a lot of people that also, I have a big collection of images, and I know a lot of other collectors. So people were very, very generous in letting me use their images in the book. So if you have the book and you look on the copyright page, there's a long list of um, sources from where I found images. I mean, our libraries are really amazing resources. And then also YouTube, there are Periscope Films, which I used a couple of their clips, is on YouTube, and you can look up their library there. So they have incredible stuff. So but I'm always on the look. I'm still collecting images from Hollywood, and because it's endlessly fascinating to me.
Well, and you also mentioned earlier that you are always searching eBay and I guess other sites like that to try and find postcards or pictures or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I had the idea for this book probably now 15 or 20 years ago when I moved to Hollywood, and I started noticing the signs coming down, and I'm like, what's happening? Like what, and that was when the Palladium did their redo from the 60s to the original 40s design, and I was like, something's happening here. So I started researching, and I started really paying close attention to images on eBay. And there were a couple like that Egyptian, that neon tower. When I found that image, I was like, oh, this is a book. Like there were a couple along the way that I was like, and stands also. I was like, this is a book. There's a lot here that is almost forgotten. So.
All right, we have a question from Jennifer, and I'm going to mangle this last name here. Segielski or Segielski. Anyway, she asks, what year is the Roberts? The lettering, she comments, the lettering style is quite modern.
Yeah, it is modern. It's a lot of our fonts from the 30s and 40s still look fresh and modern. So that's sort of that from that period. I don't know if I have the exact year here. But I would say around 40.
Okay.
Maybe a little later.
Now,
But and I know I wouldn't get away with showing that to a client, and they'd be like, we can't read this, so so I think it's incredibly stunning, and I think I'm really glad it existed.
yeah, it's beautiful. Now, Alan Woodruff is one of the gentlemen you met at the conference the last few weeks ago, and he bought your book. And he's telling everybody on the chat here they've got to buy your book. So I guess he's looking for maybe 10% right off the top or something.
Well,
But
talk, Ellen.
he asks the question. He says, Kathy, do you think that the recent trend of mid-century modern in design will save more of these LA signs?
That's a great question. LA has a history of tearing down its own history. So all these Googie coffee shops, like that corner that once held Tiny Nailers and Carolina Pines across the street from each other at La Brea and Sunset, is, it's now it's completely unrecognizable, a strip mall, and it makes me sad every time I go by. But I would hope that people are more aware of that history of mid-century modern. With, now you can search mid-century modern at Walmart or Target. So that is the level of familiarity that people have with that era now. But we'll say that we lost a mid-century modern masterpiece, a bank down on Sunset Boulevard, about a year or two ago, to a developer, and then the developer pulled out of the project. There's a lot more to this story. Don't get me started. But so that was a mid-century modern masterpiece. It had a zigzag roof, incredible, and now it's an empty pit. So I would hope that awareness is leading to some buildings being saved, but the developers have the upper hand for sure.
Okay, yeah, it's very discouraging when that happens, but you know what? Maybe this current boom in mid-century modern interest will help to save some of them.
Well, I think it did, like it did call attention to, like, there was a, Chris Pratt just tore down a Craig Elrod house in Beverly Hills or Bel Air, and there was a lot of attention put on that. And I think because people care about that architecture now.
Yeah.
And we did save the Marilyn Monroe's house here in Brentwood. So it's a mixed bag, and there are so many broken heart stories, but there are also some wins. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we got to keep trying.
Now, Allison Baker asks, it's an interesting question, actually. Who were the designers of these signs? Were there specific individuals or firms in the LA area, and maybe over different time periods, it was different people?
I love that question too. That's a great question. One of the reasons I wanted to do the book is sign makers are kind of not taken for granted, but not really considered. You know, you'll see like who designed a building, but you won't see the name of who designed the sign. So sometimes it might be the same, but other times it's a sign company that just came in and said, okay, here's your motel sign. So I highlighted 3 sign companies in the book that are local to to Southern California. Neal Brothers, that did a lot of early signs in the 20s, and Didier Delizer shared a lot of information with them, about them with me. They did the Outpost sign. And they did one of the early Egyptian signs, that vertical sign that has the whispering Egyptian at the bottom. So they were in the kind of early 20s. Then we had Metlocks, and they actually might be a familiar name because they became famous for doing California pottery later on, like Poppy Trail. But they originally started doing signs, and they did a lot of patents, early patents in the 20s. They did the Pantages here in Hollywood. And the third company I highlighted was Heath and Company, and they're a little bit newer. They're mid-century. They started in 48. And I'm actually working on a book about them. They changed the face of Los Angeles. Some of their signs are still standing. And so my goal was to highlight some of the sign makers and designers. A lot of the information is gone. So if I'm lucky, when I was looking at building records to find out who did what, I would find the sign maker. So like QRS, which was another more national chain, I believe, did the dragons on Grauman's. So there were a lot of sign companies back in the day. Every town had a neon sign shop. And you know, there'd be a designer working, just creating signs. So yeah, I hope that answers the question a little bit.
Yeah, that's fascinating, actually. Now, here's a specific question for you from Ada Kirby. Is it known what happened to the signatures of the stars on the side of the Earl Carroll
Oh,
Theater?
that's a good question. There are some stories about, I believe they're in the hands of a private collector. That's sort of the most consistent story I've heard. And the best story. And hopefully maybe when the building is finally redone, maybe that will come to light. I don't know. But as far as I know, they still exist, or most of them.
Okay, that's good. That's good. There's a win right there.
Yes.
Now,
Lectures are important. Yes.
had a couple of comments and questions here. People love your background, that you have all these restaurant menu items here. And what's the story on all those?
So these are signs. I collect signs. And these are signs from a restaurant called Murray's Bread Service that existed in Canada. There was one in Toronto, as far as I know.
Oh, actually, I remember that restaurant. I remember it well. Yes.
Murray?
Yeah, I
And they
mean,
have
that was
beautiful
when I was a
menus.
kid. We're
Yeah,
talking a long time
yeah,
ago, but I do remember that restaurant. Good
that's where
job.
they're from. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that you remember, because I've tried to find information and there's not a ton out there. Yeah. So I've been collecting these for, I don't know how long, 30 years. They're hard to find now, but they're silk screened. And yeah, I just love them, and they kind of inspire my work. I do like cartoon drawings, and they've inspired my work for sure.
Oh, okay. Well, that's really interesting.
One
Now,
of my
we're out of time here, but I'm just going to ask maybe one or two. Actually, two more questions. So Jeremy says, I know there's, and Jeremy Eversole, former board member, he's a huge neon guy.
Mhm.
I know there are a few Googie coffee shops left in LA, but are there many historic drive-in restaurants left?
Well, we have the Drive-In Donut outside of LA. We don't really, I can't think of a drive-in that we have. Not like those back in the day. Everything is drive-through. Um, but if you're in LA, you want to see Pans and Norm's, our remaining Googie coffee shop masterpieces designed by Army and Davis.
Right. Okay. Now, last question. And this is I think a good one, is what came first, the signed panels on the side of Earl's Theater, or the footprints or handprints at Grauman's Chinese Theater?
Grauman's Chinese Theater footprints came first.
They were-
They were right there from the beginning in the 20s. And the panels on the side of the Earl Carroll were added about a year or two after the theater opened, and I believe it was 38 or 40. So
Okay.
yeah.
Now, I'm getting all sorts of comments here about where can I get the book. So again, can you give us your Insta and your internet address so that people can contact you?
Okay. So the book is available at Amazon. It's available through Angel City's website, Barnes & Noble. It's available wherever fine books are sold. But if you're interested in getting a signed copy, you can contact me through my website, which is kathykikkert.com, or on Instagram, which is at Kathy Kikkert.
Okay. And Kathy, can you tell us how much it costs?
Oh, it's $40. And
Shipping, right?
I'm sorry.
Plus
Plus
shipping.
shipping.
And is there tax on top of that too?
Not from me.
Okay.
There would be from others, but not from me.
Okay.
And the book is full color. It's 9x9, fully illustrated. Every page has color and lots of amazing photos. There are hundreds of photos, and many of them rare.
Wow, that's great. I mean, I bought a copy and I haven't cracked it yet, but I can't. I'm going to start tonight. I can tell you that. Our audience is slipping away, but I just want to thank you again, Kathy, for a most excellent presentation. I just want to remind the audience that if you're not a member of the SCA, you will receive an email after the presentation, in an hour or so, inviting you to join if you like what you saw. Of course, there's no obligation, but we'd love to have new members, and we do one of these every month. And they're not all as good as yours, but they're pretty good, I gotta say.
They're amazing. I've seen amazing presentations.
Yeah, and we've been at this now for almost 5 years, and every one of the previous ones is on our website, and as a member, you can check those out as well. Now, I just want to remind everybody about next month, when on Wednesday, November the 6th, their usual time of 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific, Ron Leducer will present the Cave Painters of Schoharie County. Ron will present the fabled history of secret caverns, billboards, with bits that might even be true. So this one sounds like it's going to be a humdinger. Now, SCA members will receive the relevant details and registration link by email, as you always do, and then others can register through the SCA website directly. And of course, there's no charge. Now, thank you everyone that decided to spend some of your early autumn evening with us. And you'll expect an email inviting you to join the SCA if you're not already a member. And of course, if you know friends or relatives or colleagues that you think would have liked to have seen this presentation tonight, it will be on the SCA's website probably tomorrow. And so they can just go to sca-roadside.org and check it out there. Now, is there anything, last words you'd like to say tonight, Kathy, before we...
Oh, well, I wanted to thank you so much, and thank you and the SCA, everyone there. I mean, just an amazing organization. I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm honored to speak tonight and thrilled. And I wanted to mention supporting the SCA and also supporting and visiting the neon museums around the country, because we have a number of them all across the country. I was just at the American Sign Museum in Cincinnati. So really, supporting those institutions is really helping keeping this history alive. So thank you. And I'm really grateful to everyone for being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you again, Kathy. It was excellent. So with that, I will say good night, everyone, and we hope to see you in a month's time.